Jerusalem was crowded. Pilgrims had come from across the land. The temple was alive with activity. Roman soldiers watched from above. Merchants shouted, families gathered. And somewhere among the crowds, a man approached the city. Jesus of Nazareth. He was not arriving with an army. He was not riding in a chariot. He was approaching on a colt. According to the Gospel accounts, Jesus entered Jerusalem while crowds spread cloaks and branches before him and shouted words of welcome. To the crowd, it looked like a celebration. But Jesus knew something they did not. He was approaching his final days. The crowd saw hope, a king, a deliverer, perhaps even the beginning of a new kingdom. But Jesus did not look toward the palace. He looked toward the temple. And what he saw there would lead directly into confrontation. Jesus entered the temple, and suddenly, the atmosphere changed. He overturned the tables of the money changers. He disrupted the sellers. He confronted what he saw as corruption within a place that was meant to be a house of prayer. The Gospel accounts explicitly describe Jesus driving out buyers and sellers and overturning the tables of the money changers. Mark says the chief priests and teachers of the law then began looking for a way to kill him. And now, the authorities had a problem. Jesus was becoming impossible to ignore. The leaders knew he was dangerous, not necessarily because he carried a weapon, but because people listened, people followed, and people believed. The tension was growing, and somewhere in the shadows, a plan was forming. Then came the final meal. Jesus gathered with his closest followers, men who had walked with him, men who had seen miracles, men who believed the story was only beginning. But Jesus knew the story was entering its final chapter. Among them sat the man who would betray him, Judas. Nobody in that room could yet see how quickly everything would change. Jesus took bread, he gave thanks, and he shared it with them. Then came the cup. His words transformed an ordinary meal into a memorial, something the disciples would remember long after this night was over. The meal ended, but nobody understood that it was the last ordinary evening they would ever share with him. After the meal, Jesus went out toward the Mount of Olives, into a garden, Gethsemane, and there he prayed. The man who had faced crowds without fear now faced the moment alone. His disciples struggled to stay awake. Jesus continued to pray, because the hour was approaching. The Gospel of John places Jesus in a garden across the Kidron Valley after his final prayer, where Judas later arrives with armed men and officials. Then the darkness moved. Torches, soldiers, officials, and Judas. He approached Jesus, a friend, and yet a betrayer. The arrest had begun. John describes Judas arriving with a detachment of soldiers and officials carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. The disciples scattered, and Jesus did not run. Jesus was questioned, accused, passed between authorities, and finally, he stood before Pontius Pilate. The Roman governor had a political problem. This man was being called a king. And in a land controlled by Rome, that was dangerous. Pilate questions Jesus in John's account, while the religious leaders insist on his execution. Pilate ultimately hands him over to be crucified. Pilate had the power to release him, But political pressure was building. The soldiers mocked him. They placed a crown of thorns upon his head. They dressed him in purple, and they struck him. The image was deliberate. A man dressed as a king, but treated as a prisoner. Pilate looked at him, and the crowd demanded crucifixion. Jesus was taken outside the city, toward the place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. He carried his cross. People watched. Some mocked, others mourned. And among them were people who loved him. The Gospel of John states that Jesus was taken to Golgotha carrying his cross. The road was short, but what waited at the end would change history. They crucified him. 2 others were crucified beside him. The crowds watched. The soldiers waited. Jesus suffered. And eventually, the moment came. He spoke his final words. It is finished. John records Jesus' death with those final words, followed by his giving up his spirit. And then, silence. Jesus was dead. His body was taken down. It was wrapped. Spices were prepared, and he was placed in a tomb. A stone was rolled across the entrance. And then, nothing. No miracle. No crowd. No celebration. Only grief. John describes Joseph of Arimathea receiving the body, with Nicodemus bringing burial spices, and Jesus being placed in a new tomb in a garden. Then came the morning. Before sunrise, the women went toward the tomb. They expected death. They expected a body. But the stone was gone. The tomb was empty. Mark's account says that very early on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome came to the tomb and found the large stone rolled away. Inside, they were told that Jesus had risen. They did not find what they came looking for. The story did not end in the tomb. The disciples would report encounters with Jesus after his death. Fear became astonishment. Grief became hope. The man they had watched die was alive. For Christians, this is the center of the entire story. Not merely that Jesus died, but that death did not have the final word. John's Gospel continues from the empty tomb to Mary's encounter with Jesus and the disciples' encounters with the risen Jesus. 7 days earlier, Jerusalem had welcomed Jesus. Then came betrayal, arrest, humiliation, crucifixion, death, burial, and then the tomb was empty. The final days of Jesus were not merely the end of a life. They became the beginning of a movement that would spread far beyond Jerusalem. His followers would carry the story outward, across cities, across nations, across centuries. And today, more than 2,000 years later, the question still remains. Who was Jesus? A teacher? A prophet? A king? The Son of God? Or, as his followers came to believe, the risen Lord? The answer depends on what you believe. But one thing cannot be denied. The final days of Jesus changed history. And the story was only beginning.